everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Writer's Hive. We are a bi-weekly show that hopes to demystify the writing and publishing process and also create a hive mind where we can all discuss and share our thoughts, feelings, and ideas. Today, I am here, as always, with Amber and Katlyn to discuss things that we wish we did better in writing. So where we see a weakness in our writing skills and how we try to circumvent and boost that area of our writing up. So we're going to go through, we're going to talk about the things that we wish that we were better at, because nobody is great at all parts of writing, and hopefully give you guys some inspiration and insight and encouragement that you can find some workarounds as well. So let's start with Amber.
Well, I would say the first thing I wish I was better at, every single writer that has finished a book has done, and that's finish the book. I just struggle with finishing projects a little bit, and that's with reading or writing. As far as like my writing style, I wish I was had a little bit more of that lyrical, really pretty writing that just like flows like poetry, which like Laini Taylor and stuff is like really good at. I also wish that I was better at dialogue. My dialogue comes across as either super childish or a retired Englishman that was, in the Regency. I don't understand why I can't find that actual real life middle ground. So if I was writing a Regency book, it would probably be a perfect dialogue for me, but all writers kind of have edited. So I don't know, because I can't compare like my unedited dialogue to somebody's like polished, worked with an editor dialogue. But I would say just overall, I wish I could just write more like Laini Taylor. That's never going to happen because I'm not Laini Taylor. But I feel like that's what I would want to do better. 100%.
Katlyn, through your many different books and processes and publishers, and out of all of us, you've got the most experience with adapting your writing and honing in on things that you want to do better. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, in terms of experience, that's really what you need to do. You just need to keep writing. As Amber said, finishing a draft. If you just keep trying and working toward it, you'll eventually get there. But there is a thing such as editors, and they tend to help hone in on things that need to be fixed, even critique partners, beta readers, things like that. So having that in my process is really helpful. For me, two specific things that I always have to work on, as Amber said, dialogue and also description. So I have been really honing in on my dialogue as I'm self-publishing this year. I don't feel as I have that team behind me as much. Like, it's all up to me. I can always make my own decisions. So I've been really trying to hone in on my craft. And what's been helpful is working with Jeff Elkins, the dialogue doctor. He is also on YouTube. He has a channel. And when he was starting off, I took a few sessions with him to really improve, because I really connect well with his process. He talks about character wheels and the dialogue daisy. I'll have Julie add some links to his videos as well to help you if you have issues with dialogue. But I have found that really honing in on the specific voices as I write is so helpful. I know in the past, or you've probably heard advice that if you took away all the dialogue tags, you should be able to know who is speaking in the book. And I never really got on board with that idea, probably because I wasn't doing it right. So I learned a lot about this. And I actually, in my own work, lately I've been doing skeleton drafts, which is basically getting the whole story down as most information as possible in like a little short amount of time, if that makes sense. And then with my dialogue, if I feel like, okay, this is what this character says, I'll quickly write it and I'll just put like their initial at the front. And that really helps me hone in on the dialogue, because I'm not worried about movement. I'm not worried about, facial expressions or anything like that. I just really hone in on the dialogue. So I know Jeff does go through some videos where he talks about the dialogue only first draft. And that's just a fantastic resource. It's an exercise that I've tried, and I feel like it's really improved my dialogue a lot. Something that I constantly struggle with is description. I really have to hone in on description. I really don't worry about it in my first drafts, but in my edits, every single round of edits, I take as much time as I can with descriptions, whether that's the setting or a character. I know these characters in my mind, but I really want to make sure for my readers that they can visualize them as well. Again, with me focusing on it, I also will point this out to my critique partners and say, hey, can you make sure you're fully immersed in the scene? Is there anything that doesn't make sense? Can you see the room? Can you see the character? What do you think they look like? So that's really helpful as well, just getting that general feedback either from other writers or editors. So dialogue and description, it's something I constantly work on. I think I'm improving it the more books I write, but it's just the awareness of it is always helpful as well to make sure that you give the best book you can.
I'm laughing so hard because I've read your book. I've tried to CP your books, and it's a question that you have asked me where you're like, but can you see it? And I'm like, I can't, I see nothing. But yes, I know what you mean. And I know, like, I can still picture things because you've put it there in words. And that's definitely one of the things that I've had to work on too, and be very, very proactive about working on, especially working with professional editors for the first time with A Curse and Ash, is they're saying, I understand the emotion you're trying to evoke, and I understand what you're trying to do, but I can't see it. And I'm like, well, I can't see it. How am I supposed to make you see it? So that's definitely one of the workarounds that I've had to find. And for me, having a Pinterest board or having images for each scene or each chapter is really helpful, because I can take an inspiration picture and then be sure I'm adding those details into the actual text of the book. So that's been really helpful in edits. And then also in outlining, I'll have some kind of picture inspiration always for characters or major settings, but even just for each little scene, that's helpful for me. That's definitely something that I wish that I did better. And I can't fully blame my aphantasia. I think there's a certain part of me that's always loved stories where I could put myself into the story. So the more detail I felt like I gave, the less chance I thought a reader would be able to put themselves in, because they're like, well, that's not what my room looks like or my town looks like. So if I left it a little bit more vague, maybe they could insert themselves easier. But at the end of the day, that's not what I truly want. I want to paint something that's very rich and very vibrant. So that's something that I've had to learn how to try to get around a little bit. And that's something that I think a writer like Frederick Bachman does really well. He takes these very, very small, little nuanced towns or rooms or relationships and makes them very vibrant and very rich and very detailed, and puts you right there in it in a really visceral way where you can't help but connect to what's happening. And I love that. One of the other things that I've really had to try to improve for myself, or I wish that I could, is a sense of tension and pacing in my books. I'm trying to be very proactive about making sure that my story doesn't lag and that each chapter starts and ends in a way that makes you want to continue to turn the page. It's not something that comes naturally when I'm writing or when I'm drafting. It is something that tends to come in editing. A writer that does that very well is Kay Ankrum. She's got very short and very punchy chapters that keep you reading, like one after another. It's the perfect example of just one more chapter kind of a situation late at night, but then those chapters are only like 2 pages, so you're like, I could do another one, you just never put it down. So that's something that I want to do, and I tend to write very long chapters, so I'm trying to get better about honing in on my words and making sure that each one is crucial and moves the story forward. Flowery, pretty writing, super quotable writing. Like, I want to be that author that somebody is highlighting and underlining and tabbing and like, oh my gosh, that line changed me, but that's not me. And I've accepted that it's not going to be me, because there's really no level at which editing is going to take me to that level. I think that I have some really great lines in there, some really funny moments, maybe some laugh out loud moments or some heartfelt moments, but I'm not gonna have those, like an abundance rather of those quote board moments. And that's fine. And I'm okay with that, because I think that I've realized, as much as I love that kind of writing when I'm reading, it's something that would come with so much effort on my part as a writer that it's actually detrimental to my process to force myself to do that. I've let go of that desire. It used to be one of mine, but I've had to let that one go.
I think your tip with the Pinterest is actually a really good idea for people that don't have aphantasia as well, just to see the scene and know it. Like for me, there's certain scenes that I see so vividly in my head before I write them that it wouldn't make sense for me to find Pinterest images just because they would never ever match what was in my head. But there's other scenes that are maybe a scene that just needs to move the story forward, and it'll have that white room syndrome in my head. Like I see what the people are doing, but I don't necessarily see where they're at. They're just in a coffee shop, it doesn't really matter. So then I'll look up images of coffee shops and kind of map out like where everything is, so I know in my head which way they need to walk, or make it consistent in my head. Like don't have them walking forward out of a door when they came from the side from the door. That's not how that works. So I also do draw diagrams of my apartments or my houses that my characters live in, just so that I know their floor plan and what it looks like. It may not matter to the story whatsoever, but I know, and it helps me to write and not have to worry about which way they turn. Or one thing that I do struggle with writing a first draft, which it's fine with a first draft. It's fine. I'm not worried about it, but I tend to go from being super descriptive and like setting a scene to rushing through because it's an action scene and I need to get through what's happening. And all of a sudden, all of my descriptions have gone down the drain. Nobody cares. You do this, you do this, that. So it's like telling instead of showing. But it's just to like kind of like get out what happens. And then I'm always telling myself I can go back in and I can add detail later. But I've never gotten to the part where I really can go in and add detail later. So I do struggle with my drafts being too short just because I go from having this like vivid scene of one place to all of a sudden be like, and then they did this, they did this, they did that, they did that, they did this, and then they did that. The end. And it's just like, no. But I really don't stress over it for the first draft. I'm like, it's fine. It can be edited later. I'm not gonna stop myself in the middle of the writing process just to do that. But that's another thing that I wish I did better, was just consistency with how I write my scenes instead of doing it well here and then rushing through here just because they happen to have action rather than be having a conversation. And I can just describe that well, even though the dialogue sucks.
I wanted to jump off of what you said about using diagrams and things like that. One thing I have been using, I think the past few books, is I either jump on Zillow or like Google Earth, any of the satellite views, because I feel like a lot of my descriptions, especially with houses, tend to be very consistent with houses that I've been to or lived in. And that's not the case with every book. So I found, particularly with Barefoot on the Beach, I found an inspiration town. And I looked for houses that were for sale in that town. And I found one that I wanted to base my book off of. And the structure of the house was the house, but then I moved a little rooms around. I had like openings instead of doorways, and consistently referring to that photo in my inspiration, I was able to make a very consistent floor plan, and it wasn't just like jumping around. And I really liked it. I really liked doing that. And it's just easier for me to, if I have to look at a town specifically, I'll pull the satellite up on Google Earth, and then sort of you can see where all the streets go. So you can see structure of towns and things like that. So that might be a tip to try.
That does help too, doing the street view and just seeing, like, if you know where your house wants to be, like the route you would take to get to a certain place, or it helps you to understand your own. It may not matter in the story, but
yeah, it may not be on the paper, but having those ideas in your mind will just naturally make it a very rich story, because your inspiration will come out in the writing after you sort of get to know everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of love too that a lot of the things that we're talking about are super craft related, and it's not, I wish I could adopt this person's writing habits, right? I think we've all kind of at this point found something that works as a baseline for us. And a lot of it is stuff that comes later in edits and in editing. I think in Amber's case, it might be more of like a fleshed out drafting process, but for the most part, it's an edit level thing where it is attainable or fixable. If it's not something that comes naturally to us in our first drafting pass, it is something that is fixable. And I think that's a really good takeaway, is that everybody has something that they feel like they're not super strong at, but there's no point at which it's not fixable.
If you have like multiple things that you are unsure about, and you feel like, with me, like, I don't know if I have enough description in certain areas, and I know my dialogue isn't going to be great. If you go through edits with one thing in mind instead of trying to edit everything at once. So like for this round of edits, I'm just going to focus on making sure every scene has the description and I'm showing instead of telling, and then do that, and then finish and say, okay, now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to focus just on the dialogue. Just on dialogue, nothing else matters. And then I think that would be easier to hone in more of what you want to change, rather than, like, I get overwhelmed easily. So if I have to think about all these things I need to change in this one, I'm like, I don't even want to like think about that. So if you just like narrow focus into what you want to fix instead.
All of this to say that no writer goes into the end of a first draft or the end of a first edit, etc., feeling like they 100% nailed all aspects of their writing. At least none of us. If one of you out there can do that, leave your tips down below. So for the question of the episode, we would love to know what you have found as your best tip, trick, or advice for bringing up a level of your writing that you feel like needs a little bit of help. And as always, if you have any topics that you would like to see us discuss, please leave that in a comment down below. We keep a running tab of them and we are working our way through them. You guys have come up with some amazing episode ideas. So leave those in a comment down below, as well as your tips or tricks for other writers. Thanks for joining us. It's not something that naturally comes to me when I'm writing. That bird is so loud.
It's very relaxing though. Like,
is it?
I agree. I'm like,
okay.
Like, it
All
makes
right.
you happy. I don't know.
It does.
As long as a couple people have commented recently and been like, the birds are so nice. I'm like, really? They're dickholes.